The aim of this video is to start to give some background and some insight into my life, growing up in South Africa and then immigrating to Canada with my family. What all developed over that time and what led to such a drastic move from South Africa. But this video is going to start somewhere, not in the middle, but some time back. Just thinking about my first thoughts about doing national service and what that would mean and how I would approach that. I lived in a time, it was a period of about 12 or 15 years where South African men following their school career were called up to do national service for a period of 2 years. And this was to assist in stabilizing the turmoil within the country and on the country's borders as a result of opposition to the apartheid system. It was a convoluted situation that all South African men had to work through at that particular time, especially those who were called up for national service. And to a larger or lesser degree, it weighed on one's mind because if you were going to follow a normal route, you would have to do those duties. The alternatives were to leave the country, which some did, and some, looking back, would do that proudly. That was not a proud thing to do in those days, but looking back, it sounds like a noble thing. There are questions around that. The other thing is you could choose to be a conscientious objector, and then you would, in a certain sense, have a certain kind of a trial, and you'd be judged and you'd be sent to prison for a number of years in order to compensate for that work that you didn't want to do for the military. For the rest, it was a question of just being, you had a choice which didn't really, which wasn't really noticed or taken seriously. But some people got their choice of where you wanted to do your national service. Anyway, I was in the situation where I hadn't completed schooling, and so I was called up to the infantry, particularly to one South African infantry battalion, which was one of the mechanized battalions that were trained in the use of the what they call now the IV, or infantry fighting vehicle, called the Rattle. So you didn't drive around in trucks, which was MOT or motorized infantry, but you were carried into the battlefield with the Rattle, which was this armored vehicle. So that was what I chose to do, to put my studies on hold, and not being sure exactly where I wanted to go with those studies, I went home to East London, and then took a train up from East London to Bloemfontein to do my military service. Initial 2-year period, and then some people managed to escape it, but following that you had to do 8 camps, or 8 30-day camps. Sometimes they were 2-month camps, sometimes 1-month camps. So off we went, and I was collected in East London, and then we picked up some people in King Williamstown, some people in Queenstown and other places, and eventually we got to Wansai. Now, to enter a military camp is a very interesting thing. I once did a tour of Dachau in Munich, where the tour guide, in a very dramatic way, explained how the Jews or the political prisoners, whoever they were, would be taken off the trains. There'd be lots of shouting, and then they'd enter this huge wrought iron, this camp with this, through this huge wrought iron gate, and at the top, which said, Arbeit macht frei. Well, labor will set you free. Well, that was a cynical sign, really. But everything else was just like we experienced. Lots of shouting and screaming. You get off the train, they take you on Samels, which were a replacement of the old Bedford trucks, and you went on a Roverrit. A rover is someone who had just been entered the army, and so sometimes you got a roof or a scab on the back of his neck from the sun that would bake you, and so you were called a roof or a rover. And when they collected you from these trains and carried you with these trucks to the camp, they would do everything as unpleasant as possible so that you didn't enjoy the ride. They would brake heavily, they would pull away, they would swerve, they would take potholes so that you experienced die Roverrit, the unpleasant drive of a new recruit until you got to the army camp. And when you went through those gates, you were taken to a parade ground, and immediately, just like at Dachau, you would be stripped of your possessions, or those possessions that you're allowed to have, you were taken to the bungalow, in Afrikaans called the kaserne, and then you had to go and collect all your kit. So I'll stop there and then continue in another video concerning national service in the South African Army.